Hi, my name's Jessie and I work at Altius as a Power Platform consultant. I work across Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate. And today's session is going to look at the integration between Power Apps and Power BI, even using a little bit of Power Automate as well. I'm really excited by how all these tools work together. So let's go ahead and look at what we're going to be looking at today. So today's session is going to look at Power BI and Power Apps and how they integrate together. So here are some references to start with, which mostly look at the Microsoft documentation for this topic. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but they're there to have a look at if you want some further information on what we'll be covering today. So today we're going to look at how to use the Power Apps visual in Power BI, so how to actually bring in a Power App into the Power BI report, how to refresh a Power BI report using Power Apps and using Flow as well, and then the use of the Power BI tile in Power Apps this time, so going back the other way. So before we get started, let's have a quick look at the data set that I'll be using for this session today. So we have a list of superheroes here. We have a few different metrics about them. So you've got name, gender, eye color, race, hair color, etc. And I have a Power BI report here, which is connected into this data set using a live connection. So within Power BI, you have two different connections. You have a live connection and an import mode. Import actually brings in the data into the report and it's stored in memory, whereas live is connected directly into the database. So we're going to have a look at both of these and see how they differ. So to start with, we have this live report here. So what I'll do is I'm going to bring in this Power Apps visual, which will appear in the desktop as soon as you open it up. So I click on that and I'm just going to pull that into this space here. And to first get going, I will pull in a few fields, which will basically tie the data set and the Power App together. Okay, I'm going to choose this Power Apps training environment because that's the one I'll be using for this talk. And now I've got two options. So I can either choose an app or I can create new. We are going to look at both. But to start with, let's create new and let's create an app from scratch. So it's going to ask me, are you sure you want to step outside of the browser? And I do. So just let that open up. I'll just take a second. So as soon as that's open, I'm going to bring in the data set that we have into this report as well. So it's bought a few components on the page to start with. We don't want any of those. So I'm going to get rid of those. And then we're going to look at the data sources and we will bring in the data set like so. And I'm going to insert a form, so an edit form in order to edit some of the data. I'm just going to bring in a couple of fields once I've connected it to the data source. So we'll just put in name and let's say height. This is how we're going to add some new superheroes into our data set. I'm going to create two buttons as well. So we'll call this one new. So that's a new superhero, and we'll call this one submit. And essentially what we want to do is our form is called form 1. Of course, if we were doing this for real, we would name our controls better. But for now, we're just going to call a formula called form 1 and new. We want to submit the form. We click on submit using this here. Okay, and just to make it look a little bit prettier, I'm going to give it a title. I'm going to use a theme as well at the back. And last thing is I'm just going to put an image here as well. So that is our complete application here. Now, what we can do is we can look in this submit button and you'll see that by having this Power App open from Power BI, from the Power BI report, Power BI integration has appeared here. Now, if I see what controls I have under Power BI integration, I have this refresh control. Now, what this will do is only in a live query mode, as soon as I submit this data, it's going to refresh the data behind my Power BI report automatically, right? So let's see this in action. So I'm just going to save this, and we'll call this app demo. A second. So that's now been shared. And now if I come over to my desktop application, my Power BI report is now picking up my Power App. And now I can go ahead and publish this so that I can see what a user will now see from this experience. Okay, so while that's publishing, we'll come over to Power BI and we'll open up our report in here. Make sure it's the right one. And we can see that our Power BI report has published with our Power Up there. Now, what we can do now is this is what a user is going to actually see. So I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to give it a name. So I want to add a superhero called superhero, let's say X, and give them a very big height. And I'm going to click Submit. And you see, automatically, this number here has changed from a 200 to a 201. So this is now automatically refreshing the data behind. And if we check our database now, of course, at the bottom, we're going to see our superhero X, which is great. Okay, so bringing this more into the real world, of course, you're not going to be looking at superheroes within your organization, probably. But what you might have is maybe some reference data, or maybe you want your users to actually send off some actions, perhaps on the data that's on your report. And now this is a way in which you can send off that data into the database and immediately see the impact that that has on your report. So in our case, that 200 has changed to 201. Okay, that's live query, but of course, we might actually be in import. Now, when you're in import, the Power BI integration.refresh does not happen. We can get around this. We can do something else to refresh the imported data as well, because with an imported data set, you need to schedule the refresh. You need to tell Power BI when you want it to refresh. So this time what we'll do is we'll bring in an app again. So we're in import this time. And we'll bring in a few fields. And once it's got the environments, we pick up the Power Apps training environment. And this time I'm going to choose an application. So we already have that app demo, which we've just made. So we don't need to create it again. And now we're asked, we want to go to the studio or skip. We're going to go to the studio. Okay. So I already have it open. So I'm going to let it open in this screen here. Okay. And here what I'm going to do is in my data sources, I'm going to pull in the Power BI connector, like so. So here we can actually add a connection to the Power BI connector in Power Apps. So Power BI has a built-in connector which can actually do a few different actions. So let's see how this works. So this time, after we submit our data, we're not going to use Power BI integration because we know that that does not work for a import query mode. But instead, we're going to use this refresh dataset, and it's asking us where our dataset is and which workspace our dataset is in. Okay, so the way in which we actually pick this up from Power BI is if we head over to Power BI now. So what I have done is I have actually published this report already. And the reason for that is, if I now look at the data set behind my import query mode, I can actually pick up the group ID and the dataset ID. And in order for that to happen, I do have to have published my report already. Okay, so I'm going to pick up this group ID, which is the first part in that URL that you can see. So I head over to my Power App now, and so I'll use a quotation to hold that text. And then I have my dataset ID, which in my Power BI is the second bit of my URL up until here. Which I'll also pick up like so. Okay. So that's great, but that's quite fiddly. So you need to actually read all that text and find it. So we're going to also look at another way we can do this. So all I've done for this is I've just copied the button, and I'm going to get rid of this section for now. Okay. And I'm going to rename this as submit using flow. So we're going to have two different options of actually submitting the data and getting it to refresh. So this time what we'll do is we'll come over to Power Automate, go to my flows, make sure we're in the right environment, and we're going to create a new flow from template. And we'll use a Powerups button to trigger our flow. And we'll call this app demo trigger. Create a new step. And here we have the same kind of connectors that we had within Powerups. So we'll pick up this Power BI connector and we'll select refresh a dataset. This time, we don't have to actually type in those letters and numbers that we had to do. But what we can do is pick up our environment and pick up our dataset, which actually makes it a little bit easier with the UI to do that. So I'll save that one. Okay, so now our flow is created, and I'll come back to my demo, and this time in this button, I will create an action. So with Powerups, to actually attach something to a flow, it is useful just to create a separate button just to attach that flow. So you click on that button and then click action, click on Power Automate, and now you'll see all the list of different flows that we have, including our trigger, which is there. So once that's attached, we can put that in the button like this. So now I can pick this up. I don't need this button anymore, and I can submit using flow. And now what this will do is both methods will actually show that the report, once something has been submitted, so that's why we have this semicolon, once the form is submitted, go ahead and refresh that data set straight away. And the same thing here. So go ahead and refresh the data set behind as soon as it's complete. Okay, so once this is done, we're going to save and publish this as well. So once that's been published, we'll head over to our desktop like so. And now when we actually publish this report, it will pick up the latest version of that app. So we'll do that. And while this is actually publishing, it's useful to know that when you start building these solutions with Powerups and Power BI, you need to ensure that you've shared both the Power BI report and the Power App with the users. So for me, it's working, and I'm not having to share it beyond using the app because I'm the creator of the report. So by default, I have the ability to see both the Power BI report and the Power App. So now that's published, we'll go back to our report. And our app will now appear. It's asking us to allow the new connectors that we've used, and that is the case for the first time that you use this. So now that our report is published, we can head over to Power BI and have a look at our report. And we see here that it's been published, and we can just refresh that to make sure we've got the latest version. And we see here now that we've got this app here, and we can actually create a new superhero now. So we'll call it Superhero Z as an example. Just give it a random height. We've got two options now. So we can use the submit using the Power BI connector in Powerups, or we can use the same, which is the connector in Flow. Now, under the hood, they're actually doing the same thing. So I'm not going to test both versions because they are, in fact, calling the same kind of method. But we will use the Flow one just to see how that works. And we can see here this number doesn't change straight away. And that's because when we're in import mode, it actually takes a few seconds for that data set to be refreshed in the background, and that could depend on how big your data set is, among other factors. So what we actually need to do for this is we need to refresh the browser itself in order to get the most up-to-date data. And we see now that that's actually changed to 205. So we had a few superheroes that were basically generated from the start of the demo, including some test ones, which is why that number has shot up. Okay, so that's a use of Power BI within Power Apps. And just to give a very quick recap of what we just covered. So Power Apps can be added in the desktop or in the service. Power BI integration only appears if you open the app from the report server. So this sends the data to Power BI, and it's only for the live query mode, as detailed there. So direct query mode at the bottom. Okay, so this is the flow that we used to refresh the Power BI report as well. So now let's have a look at using a Power BI tile in Power Apps now. So we'll head over to our Power Apps to start with this time. So now we're bringing Power BI into Power Apps. So let's create a new screen, like so. So this is where we're going to hold our Power BI tile once we bring it in. So as it currently stands, we can only bring in dashboard tiles into our Power BI report. So the way to actually build a dashboard tile is you start over here and you can pin a live page. So I'm going to pick up perhaps not the whole, perhaps something like this. And maybe I want to pin this page. Just pinning the whole thing. Oops. Okay, so I click on this pin here. So I'm actually going to pick this pin here. So I'm just going to pin that visual to a new dashboard. And I'm going to create a new dashboard and call it app demo. Right? And you'll see there that I had a couple of dashboards that were created earlier. So we're actually going to use one that was created earlier. And the reason for this is there is a lag between actually publishing the dashboard tile and then Power Apps being able to pick it up. But just to see how it's actually done, I'm going to show you this here. So now we can go to the dashboard. We have this tile here. And now if we go over to our app demo, we're going to put in a Power BI tile within charts like this. And we can pick up that tile from Workspace. And as you can see, our app demo has appeared. Oh no, it hasn't actually, the tile hasn't appeared immediately, which is why I'm going to use one that was created earlier, but it's the same tile. So if that does happen, what you need to do is essentially save, close your Power App, and then open it again, and then it will pick up the changes after a few minutes or so. So this is great. So now we've got this tile that has come in, and we can actually now direct our user in Power Apps to look at data within our Power BI report. Why might this actually be useful? If you've got Power BI, you've got Power Apps, why would you want to put them together? One of the reasons for this is perhaps now you're doing your actions on here, and now you want your user to have a very quick look at some data to make a decision about some data that they're entering. And the thing is now, if I click on this report, it actually opens up the dashboard. So it's going to go straight into that report even. So it's opened up the whole report. So this is a way in which you could have various tiles in your page and actually linking to various different reports. And it can almost serve as like a hub for the various reports within your organization. Okay, so I'm going to put a drop down in now so that we can actually get our user to start interacting with this report and showing the data that they want. So I've got this list of publishers that we have from our database. And now what we want to happen is when the user starts clicking on maybe DC Comics or Marvel, we actually want this tile to actually filter. So what we'll do is we're going to add a bit of code at the end, and I'm going to explain what's actually been written here. So we have a few things here, and what it's basically saying is filter our database based on the publisher being equal to the value in our dropdown here. So just by adding this into the tile URL here, the user can now just pick on Marvel Comics, for example, and see that data filtering. So that's another great thing we can do to integrate Power BI and Power Apps together. So to recap, what we've just had a look at is the fact that only dashboard tiles can be shared in Power Apps. We need to ensure the Power BI tile is also shared with the Power user as well. Column names can have no spaces is really important. So in order to actually get that tile URL to filter by columns, the column name can't have spaces. Only textual fields can be made. So if you have a numeric field, that's not going to work. And in general, only 3 tiles should be loaded at any one time. And that's because it's quite resource intensive for the Power app to actually pick that up. Thank you for taking your time to watch the video. I hope you learned something new about the integration of Power BI and Power Apps. That was only a small snippet, so I know there's a whole lot more that we could cover. So I really hope you do have fun building great solutions with these tools. Thank you.